The story begins with a college student, Sawyer Scott, jogging on the track field. She pauses when she gets a voicemail from a company where she recently applied. The message informs her she's been selected for an interview in Washington, D.C., scheduled for the day after tomorrow. Overjoyed, Sawyer begins preparing for the opportunity she's been anticipating for so long. The next day, Sawyer sets off for Washington, relying on her phone's GPS for directions. While driving, she hears a radio report about heavy traffic on the main highway due to the holiday season. To avoid delays, she opts for a rural route, eventually finding herself in an unfamiliar area. She encounters a dead end near a forested area where the road is closed. Although her GPS advises a U-turn, she presses on in search of another way. As she navigates further, Sawyer comes to a T-junction and pulls over to consult her map. Nearby, two men are digging with shovels. They notice her car and appear unsettled, concerned that she may have seen them. Frustrated with her GPS, Sawyer switches to a paper map and continues her journey. Later, she stops by the roadside to examine the map more closely. Suddenly, a truck arrives and the same two men, introducing themselves as brothers Hollister and Buck, approach her. The brothers offer help after Sawyer explains that she's lost. Hollister takes her map and points out how to get back to the highway. As she prepares to leave, Hollister unexpectedly invites her to dinner at his house. Sawyer politely declines, but he insists it's getting dark and she might not make it to the highway in time. Suddenly, Buck tries to restrain her, but Sawyer grabs a knife from his pocket and stabs him. He quickly retaliates, stabbing her in the thigh. Despite her injuries, Sawyer manages to escape into the woods. The brothers chase after her, but Sawyer hides in a burrow and uses her sweater to tend to her wound. She cleverly distracts them by throwing a rock to mislead their search. As night falls, the brothers give up and leave, while Sawyer, exhausted and frightened, takes refuge in the burrow and falls asleep. The next morning at a nearby police station, Sheriff Nick receives a call about an abandoned car and passes it along to his boss, Doyle. Doyle investigates and finds Sawyer's car by the roadside, along with bloodstains indicating trouble. Following this, he visits the brothers' house to inquire about the vehicle. Hollister denies any knowledge of it, and though Doyle notices their injuries, they claim it was a hunting accident. With no concrete evidence, Doyle leaves. Meanwhile, Sawyer wakes up, but her injuries prevent her from walking properly. She seeks shelter near a cliff and tries to care for her wounds, clinging to the hope that someone will notice her car and come to her rescue. However, the brothers tow her car away, taking it out of sight. While resting, Sawyer sees her car rolling down the slope and overhears the brothers discussing their plan to find her before it's too late. Buck reassures Hollister, believing Sawyer's injuries will soon lead to her demise. Once the brothers leave, Sawyer crawls to her wrecked car and retrieves her damaged phone. Despite being operational, it has no signal, and she notices several missed calls from her mother. She tries calling back but fails to connect. As the brothers search for her in the forest, Hollister finds bloody leaves and suspects she's nearby. Desperate and injured, Sawyer wanders through the forest in search of a signal. Her phone dies unexpectedly, adding to her despair. Night falls and she becomes increasingly disoriented, collapsing in exhaustion. In her dazed state, she sees a figure approaching and tries to speak, but she loses consciousness before hearing his response. The following morning, Sawyer wakes up in a bed inside a trailer, startled to find her injuries cleaned and bandaged. She cautiously explores the trailer but discovers all the doors are locked. While wandering, she stumbles into a kitchen that appears to double as a laboratory. At that moment, a man named Lal approaches her, revealing himself as the one who rescued her. Terrified, Sawyer warns him to stay back, but when she spots a bottle of lye on the counter, she throws it at his face. Before she can escape, dizziness overtakes her, and she collapses once again. Meanwhile, at the police station, Nick voices his concerns about the abandoned car to Doyle, urging for a deeper investigation. However, Doyle dismisses Nick's suspicions, brushing off the situation as trivial. Nick suspects Buck and Hollister are involved, but Doyle downplays the brothers as troublemakers, not criminals. Back in the trailer, Sawyer regains consciousness to find her hands bound. Lal brings her a sandwich and drink, ignoring her pleas to go to the hospital and call the police. While observing him pack meth in the kitchen, Sawyer introduces herself, recounting her ordeal and expressing concern for her worried parents. She pleads for Lal's help, but their conversation is interrupted by the sound of a vehicle approaching. Sawyer screams for help, but Lal quickly silences her, warning that shouting could get her killed. He steps outside to greet Buck and Hollister, who are revealed to be his cousins and the suppliers for his meth operation. The brothers question Lal about the missing girl in the area, but he denies any knowledge of her. Inside, Sawyer spots another container of lye and uses it to weaken her restraints. Buck and Hollister grow suspicious of Lal's uncharacteristic behavior, no beer or hospitality, which leads them to investigate the trailer. Fortunately, by the time they search, Sawyer has already slipped away into the woods. Satisfied she's gone, the brothers leave, but Lal eventually catches up to Sawyer and drags her back to the trailer. At the police station, Nick and Doyle are summoned by State Police Commander Slattery, who chastises Doyle for his lack of progress. Nick informs Slattery that the abandoned car belongs to a young woman named Sawyer, who has been missing for several days. Slattery orders the case to be prioritized, insisting they find Sawyer immediately. Back at the trailer, Lal commends Sawyer for her clever escape attempt, but warns her about the risks of leaving. He explains that they're 5 miles from the main road and 20 from the nearest town, with no car at his disposal. If she tries to leave on foot, she's likely to encounter Buck or Hollister. Despite her doubts, Lal cuts her restraints, telling her she's free to leave but cautioning against it. He promises to borrow the brothers' truck and drop her somewhere safe after they leave for Charleston that weekend. Elsewhere, Doyle confronts Buck and Hollister, demanding the truth about the missing girl under pressure from his superior. It's revealed that the brothers, along with Doyle, are part of a drug operation. Hollister admits they attacked Sawyer because they thought she saw them burying a body. The body, it turns out, was someone Doyle had ordered them to dispose of. The brothers reassure Doyle that Sawyer is likely dead and promise to search for her the next day. The scene shifts to Lal in the trailer cooking meth. Sawyer, showing curiosity about his work, watches as he explains the process. He demonstrates how he uses anhydrous ammonia, a substance even more dangerous than lye, capable of causing severe burns in seconds. As Sawyer assists Lal with his meth operation, she secretly pockets a garden fork for protection. Lal notices the missing tool, realizing she still doesn't trust him but doesn't confront her. Later, Lal informs Sawyer that Buck and Hollister will be arriving soon, urging her to hide. She complies, and moments after the brothers arrive with raw materials, they quickly leave due to the heavy, toxic gas filling the trailer. Meanwhile, Deputy Nick continues his investigation into Sawyer's disappearance. Despite being urged to spend Thanksgiving with his family, Nick decides to stay late. As he prepares to leave, he overhears Doyle instructing Hollister to find Sawyer and ensure she's killed. Horrified by the revelation that his boss is corrupt, Nick confronts Doyle, pulling his gun on him. Doyle pleads for calm, claiming they're partners, but as Nick heads to his car, Doyle shoots him dead. That evening, Doyle hands Nick's body over to the brothers, instructing them to dispose of it. He also retrieves Sawyer's wallet from Hollister, which had been found in her abandoned car. The following day, Slattery confronts Doyle about both Sawyer's and Nick's disappearances, but Doyle brushes off Nick's absence, claiming he may have gone drinking with friends. Slattery announces that state police will now lead the search for Sawyer, with her parents arriving to assist. Panicking, Doyle plants Sawyer's wallet in Nick's locker and pretends to discover it in front of Slattery, implicating Nick in the case. Shocked, Slattery orders his team to focus on finding Nick, believing he may have been involved in Sawyer's disappearance. Later, Doyle visits Lowell's trailer to inspect the meth operation. Lal greets him with a shotgun, refusing to let him inside. When Doyle attempts to assert authority, Lal calmly points out that they're standing next to a barrel of ether, threatening to ignite it with a single shot. Intimidated, Doyle backs off and leaves, warning Lowell to respect him in the future. As Doyle drives away, he encounters the brothers and scolds them for their cousin's defiance. He orders them to handle their next drug deal carefully to prove they're capable of competing with a Mexican cartel. Shortly after, the brothers return to Lowell's trailer to collect a fresh batch of meth. Hollister notices 2 distinct sets of footprints near the trailer's stairs but says nothing and departs. Back inside, Lowell informs Sawyer they'll wait until nightfall before heading to the state police. He shares his desire to leave this life behind and start fresh, which earns a measure of trust from Sawyer. She returns the garden fork she had taken, but Lowell tells her to keep it as a keepsake. Their conversation is interrupted when the brothers unexpectedly barge in, shocked to find Sawyer alive. Hollister accuses Lal of betrayal and demands Sawyer come with him. Lal tries to de-escalate, suggesting they sit and talk while Sawyer prepares coffee. As the brothers argue, Lal claims he's been holding Sawyer hostage, forcing her to work for him. Following his leave, Sawyer discreetly pours anhydrous ammonia into a mug and places it in the microwave, pretending to make coffee. Lal continues to act nonchalant, instructing Sawyer to sit on his lap, which amuses Hollister. However, Buck grows suspicious, noticing something unusual happening in the microwave. A massive explosion tears through the trailer, instantly killing Buck. Lal and Sawyer manage to escape, but Lal is critically injured. Sawyer pleads with him to come along, but he insists he won't make it. Instead, he gives her directions to the nearest road and urges her to run. As Sawyer flees, a severely burned Hollister emerges from the wreckage, determined to shoot her. However, Lal intervenes, grabbing his cousin from behind. The two engage in a vicious fight, with Lal nearly overpowering Hollister. Just as Lal is about to land the final blow, Doyle arrives unexpectedly and shoots him. Hollister momentarily relaxes, believing he's been saved, but Doyle coldly shoots him as well. Meanwhile, Sawyer stumbles out of the forest and is relieved to see a police car. She waves it down, only to discover it's driven by Doyle, whom she doesn't recognize. Desperate and exhausted, Sawyer recounts her ordeal, explaining how she was attacked by two men on the road and later saved by Law. She also mentions that all three men were working for someone else, though she never saw the ringleader's face. Sawyer becomes suspicious when Doyle doesn't call for backup or offer to return for Law. Her suspicions are confirmed when Doyle casually repeats the same phrase she overheard Lowell's boss say outside the trailer. Horrified, Sawyer realizes Doyle is the mastermind behind everything. Doyle abruptly stops the car and forces Sawyer out, leading her to a nearby river. Terrified, Sawyer begs for mercy, but Doyle grabs her by the hair and attempts to drown her. In a desperate bid for survival, Sawyer uses the garden fork she had hidden earlier, stabbing him repeatedly in the foot, face, and chest. Doyle collapses, his body swept away by the river's current. In the aftermath, a battered and exhausted Sawyer trudges back toward the road, following Lowell's instructions. She is too traumatized to cry out when police cars finally arrive, their flashing lights illuminating her path. The scene ends with Sawyer walking into the distance, her ordeal far from forgotten. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.